We're back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about the number one problem with watches, watch collecting, watch buying, watch purchasing, the whole watch community. The number one problem that I see that is going to be facing the industry. So in other words, the industry is going to be facing this problem in 2020 and the coming years. I've already seen a lot of this. I work with so many of you out there through delraywatch.com as well as my Instagram, The Real John P. I'm part of a lot of watch collector communities at varying levels and degrees, and I hear a lot of feedback from all of you, especially in the comments below, like you always do, and I do appreciate the thumbs up, the likes, and subscribes, by the way. But I get so much feedback, and I've really collected a lot of this, kind of molded over, and I think for this new year, by the way, Happy New Year, I think there's just this issue that's going to be plaguing the watch community, specifically with collecting and collectors, and I think it's going to be the ego. Now, I don't think that there's a problem necessarily with any people in particularly. I think the issue is actually by some brands, some boutiques, some authorized dealers out there, and I think this is a byproduct of where the luxury goods industry has come from. Now, I'm going to talk about a few brands, a few examples that I think are going through some not only growing pains, but also some pains of a shifting consumer market out there with luxury goods, as well as some brands that I think are doing a very great job at differing scales. On the wrist today, I have actually an H. Moser Mayu in white gold. I love this thing, and I think it's actually one of the brands that's tackling kind of this old school mentality of pretentiousness in luxury goods absolutely very well, keeping up with modern times. So let's talk about it, guys. So a lot of you guys are hardcore watch collectors, watch geeks, watch buffs, and you do frequent some boutiques, some authorized dealers. You like to try on some things, you like to see what's new, you like to talk with people about watches, and you might not be part of any of the communities such as Red Bar or the others, so you go to the stores in hopes that perhaps there's someone to talk to about watches. Now, sometimes you're welcomed with open arms. I'll talk about it later, but I think Breitling boutiques do a great job of kind of tickling that fancy for the watch enthusiast, right? In watches, we have enthusiasts and we have the casual buyers that purchases just something nice, right? Not necessarily a diehard watch collector, but they want something nice. And I think Breitling is doing pretty well with enthusiasts now. But for example, if you're a watch enthusiast and you go into a Rolex boutique or a Rolex authorized dealer that's a primary Rolex authorized dealer shop, sometimes I do get feedback that there's kind of this pretentiousness about it. The watch collectors are not always kind of tickled and engaged in the way that they want to, and it's more geared towards that kind of casual buyer that just Rolex is the best. And I won't get into that train of thought, but I get that feedback a lot. And even if I've gone into some Rolex boutiques wearing some very high-end watches, the salesperson might not even know watches to recognize that, not be able to tell what's a real buyer. And in modern times where a lot of wealth has been created over the last few decades, especially through things like crypto and emerging technologies, the buyer might be wearing a pair of gym shorts. I have a friend, and he wears only basically sports gym attire, and he could walk in and buy literally anything, and he even tells me oftentimes, he's completely disregarded on the sales floor, even though he does have quite a collection. So there's this old school mentality, this pretentiousness that you see in brands that are doing just absolutely so well, and you see it from Patek Philippe, you see it from Rolex, and once again, in varying degrees. Some authorized dealers, if they're still authorized dealers, and for these brands there are, they do a pretty good job, some of them, at actually tickling that watch geek fancy because they also carry other brands. But when you get into the one brand shop, you get into some of the more company-owned or company-financed boutiques, like a Rolex boutique, watch geeks can sometimes feel pushed aside. And I see it in all the comments below. When everyone reaches out to us, comes to us at Del Rey Watch for a Rolex, I received the feedback that, they went to the boutique, they were treated horribly, they don't know that if they really believe in the brand anymore because of the way they've been treated as a consumer, and, perhaps they'll look at other options. And I think it's very fair to say that brands like Omega that were once kind of treated as inferior to Rolex and Patek Philippe brands and lineups are becoming more popular and gaining a lot more speed because in my experience and the experience of others, if you go into like something like an Omega boutique, they're really focusing on collectors in such a way that really gets those people going, really gets their gears moving. You know, they have Speedmaster events where you can go and take a picture next to an astronaut, things like that. And I just see these old world brands like Patek Philippe who do make absolutely quality products and do deliver great service. It's just a different type of service and not necessarily geared towards the collectors. But I'll tell you that if there's a downturn in the US economy or the world markets or any economy that's a mass consumer of these luxury goods, there's a downturn, these brands like Rolex namely, are going to be completely left without those enthusiasts, right? Because the enthusiasts are going to be purchasing watches, going to be trading watches in a down economy, whereas the general, you know, the consumer that just wanted a luxury item is not necessarily going to be buying that Rolex. Perhaps they'll be pulled back a little bit in a downturn economy. So they're really shooting themselves in the foot if that ever were to happen. The collectors are going to be left with a very bad taste in their mouth. Now let's consider Breitling, right? I've gone to the Breitling boutique at the Aventura Mall in South Florida, and they do just a great job at kind of tickling that collector's mentality, right? So I use the word tickling. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but I know that you catch my drift. You walk in, they offer you food, and the people there really know the watches. While I'm not the biggest fan of all of the Breitling models, I think some have pretty redeeming qualities, especially with the new Aviator 8 lineup, but I think they just do a great job. They ask you what you collect, they ask you what you have in your collection, they talk to you a little bit about, they share some information about the watches, and that's not something you necessarily get from these old world, old-timey mentality brands that just rely on their company heritage. And a perfect example, so we look at Breitling, right? Go to the Breitling website, kind of think about it. Don't necessarily look for anything specific, but go to the website, just look, feel, notice the color schemes, notice product placement of the watches, and then go to Rolex, go to Patek Philippe, and see. You go to Rolex, you go to Patek Philippe, you're hit in the face with more about the company, what they do, and not necessarily the watches. Go to Breitling, go to Omega, go to Ulysse Nardin, go to even H. Moser, Girard-Perregaux, right on the front page. First of all, you'll see it's very modern. It's very tech-oriented. They've really developed and focused on the internet. It's 2020, guys. The internet is not going anywhere. Absolutely not. But you go there and the watches are in front of your face. Even go to our website, delraywatch.com. The watches that we just took in are right there on the homepage, and the recent release models and Girard-Perregaux are there. Even Audemars Piguet does a decent job. I'll say a little bit different. They're kind of a mesh between the new and the old school mentality. But you see these other brands like GP, Omega, Breitling, and they're all about the watches. And while they still do provide a luxury experience and luxury products, they are much more welcoming, I would say, to the enthusiast. And the enthusiast is going to be extremely important to brands in the future if there is to be a downturn once again in these markets. So something I've noticed, guys, is, kind of this ego from certain brands is starting to trickle out there. And if you're any of the brands that are watching, if you're Breitling, Girard-Perregaux, I think you're doing a great job. If you're H. Moser, I think you're doing an extraordinary job at really captivating that kind of collector group of consumer. And of course, if you're Rolex or Patek Philippe, today you don't have to do anything, but tomorrow you may have to, and you don't want to leave yourself in the dust. Now, I of course, guys, this is potentially much down the road into the future, but some of these brands are very, very old, and so they do need to be thinking about the long-term strategy of the brands as well. But I want to know, what do you all have to say about this? Do any of you have any negative experience with certain old school mentality brands? Do any of you have great experience with those brands as well? And what is your favorite brand that you believe does a great job at really engaging the modern luxury watch consumer? more. I want to see it and hear it in the comments below. Please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Once again, Happy New Year. Hopefully you all had great holiday and celebrations, and I'm looking forward to making a lot more content and talking with you in the year 2020. Thanks, guys. You have been chatting with John P. Ciao.